Okay, we're live. It's the boxing show. Lukie, Dakota, Dakota, and Lukie. I'm Lukie as always, and here's Dakota. We're going to be talking about kind of like the things that you'd click on, hopefully, and maybe give you some insight if this is your first time listening to the show. Can you do all the things that people typically do when they like a show, which is subscribe, hit a thumbs up, or tell a
Show a
friend?
little love, folks.
That's right, right? Dakota, how you doing?
I'm doing all right, brother. It's a big week in my world, but happy to be here as always. I see you got Alycia in the title. We got a lot to get to, bro. So I'm gonna let you Steve Nash it and start point manning.
Yeah, so let's start with obviously there's a Netflix card. Tyson Fury comes back. I'm not even sure you watched it. I don't even know if it matters if you watched it. The fight was arbitrary. There were 2 or 3 maybe competitive rounds where Fury just looked like he didn't want to move around. And Makhmudov like threw punches at him and it was competitive. And then Fury realized he could move around. He's coming off a 16-month layoff. And the fight was really bad. It was just basically a tune-up fight. It was a tune-up fight in a stadium. Makhmudov is a courageous fighter. He's a strong fighter, but he also started boxing, I believe, 9 years ago. And he lacked the ability to set up punches. So I really don't even want to talk about this fight because the fight just wasn't that fascinating, if we're being honest. What I would like to talk about is Tyson Fury versus Anthony Joshua. And the two started talking after. With Fury, you get an element of pro wrestling at times. He starts doing the, hey, brother, we're going to do this. And with Joshua, complicated figure, right? He's probably never been as good as people wanted him to be, but he really wanted to compete at the highest level. I don't think there's a version of Joshua in my heart of hearts that can beat Fury, yet he kind of embodied something that carried over from the Conor Benn fight we'll talk about in a second, where it's like this A-side treatment. I'm not going to get in the ring because I'm the boss and I'm the A-side treatment. And it's been really refreshing to not deal with that these last couple of years. It's been something I've enjoyed about the Saudis is we don't hear who's the A-side. It was a very boring conversation. No one liked that conversation. And my takeaway really from this fight was it's not 2016. It's not 2018. These guys are closer to being done than they realize. And this fight isn't of the most importance anymore. It's more of like an exhibition or a fun fight for the fans. But this is not the most consequential heavyweights in the world anymore. And that was my takeaway from the Fury fight, which I don't know if that was supposed to be the takeaway, but I left looking at it like this is maybe number 6 and 7 calling each other out who have a lot of fans.
Listen, bro, I think it's a little bit like Amir Khan and Kell Brook a few years ago, where it was two guys that were a fascination of British boxing, that were both stars, that were always sort of compared to each other and made really good careers separate from each other, but never had that head-to-head clash until the end of their careers. And I think that, unfortunately, when you wait this long, there really isn't any way for that to be satisfying, because you have two guys that aren't at the top of their game anymore, that have both taken some punishment, and it's just not the best version of what it's going to be. So however that fight winds up is much less consequential, because it's not particularly consequential in the landscape of heavyweight boxing.
I think also we have to factor in Anthony Joshua lost some of his close personal friends via tragedy. So that's not great, you know? I think it's unrealistic to be like, yeah, man, Street Fighter 2, the video game, he lost some of his buds, but he's going to come in with this many attributes. Like, first off, our heart and prayers go out to him, even though he's rich. It's sad to have a tragedy happen to you. And second off, like Fury, you know, he's disappears from boxing, and he's at an age where if he does another hiatus, I don't think he can come back again. So it's like he's probably got to make the most out of like this 18th month run. And I just didn't see a guy that looked like that guy from 2019. Like the best Fury was like, obviously the 2015 guy is gone that beat Klitschko. But I didn't even see the Wilder guy. To me, this was, Fury as the Rolling Stones playing the albums you want to hear, but they're older. So the riffs aren't the same, but the vibe, if you're a hardcore fan, you go, that was pretty fun. But it's just not quite the same thing. And it's like Joshua, I'll give Joshua credit though. He was there from early in the card. Did a 4 or 5 hour sit in ringside. You don't see that from many guys. But it just wasn't very fascinating to me.
My question to you though, Lukie, is because I only saw the highlights because it was yet again on another different streaming service. We're getting more piecemeal, but how much of that is just that Fury has traditionally throughout his career fought down to the level of his opposition? He's had uninspired performances in fights that he's the favorite in. How much of it is just that piece of his character?
I think that's some of it, but to me, the foot speed isn't the same. And like to me, I should assess what I think makes Fury special besides his antics and stuff. Is he had a very fast jab where he focused on speed. So he was like fast with his feet, and his jab was just all about speed because he's just this big guy, and he had this really good jab. And it looked like his jab wasn't quite as fast and snappy. And that could be ring rust. But when a guy gets to 37, my mind starts to think maybe that's just where we're at. There is ring rust. So to me, yes, there was the fighting down to the level of opposition, but it was also like some of his best attributes that would wow me just didn't seem the same. And it could be fighting down to the level of competition, saying the same words over and over. But even in his bad performances, I remember seeing those attributes. If you get what I'm saying, it was often that he was being lazy and just putting himself on the ropes and hamming it up. In this fight, he was going for walks, and the walks really felt like walks. They didn't feel like strolls. He was hard. He was getting away from a flat-footed, limited fighter, but he wasn't as able to do
He didn't
those
have that
actions.
bounce. Yeah, he didn't have that
Yeah.
bounce. Yeah, and I think that his movement, his fleet of foot mixed with his size and his power and his ability to be physical when he needs to was part of what made him dangerous. And like in the clips that I saw, what the best way I could describe how he looked is like flimsy. Like it's the same guy, but it's a little looser. His feet aren't quite under him the same way. He's not sitting down on his shots the same way, and he just looks kind of flimsy.
Just looks like an older fighter to me. Like
Yeah.
everything's fine. He looks kind of like when a coach would teach you something and be like, "Yeah, I used to be really good at this," and it's still really good. It just doesn't look like what it probably used to.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go to our guy Conor Benn. Do you have any opinions? I'm sure you just watched the highlights or anything. Do you have any opinions before I go in on this?
Just from what I saw, like that's not an elite level guy. We just watched Jojo Diaz basically hurt Regis Prograis every time he landed a clean punch, former featherweight Jojo Diaz. And it didn't, at least from what I've seen, he was not able to do that to Regis. And you have to wonder how much of that is having to come back down and weight, or if it's just that at a certain level at welterweight, he doesn't look as explosive. He's not, the knockout over Chris Algieri had more to do with what Chris had left in the tank and less to do with how special Ben is.
Yeah, I mean, this fight makes me question boxing, like liking boxing, because it's like Conor Benn had every single advantage going into this fight. He forced a guy who basically his legs are gone, doesn't have his attributes from when he was an elite fighter. He's now a back foot boxer. He was never the greatest boxer. He wasn't a bad boxer, but he wasn't a great boxer. He was more of a come forward pressure fighter who had craft and volume. And I mean, Ben was deeply troubled in this fight. He got rocked a few times. Yes, he rocked him, but this is what I don't like about boxing. And this is kind of what Joshua symbolized in the Fury after fight. Is when there's fighters who always want A-side advantages. And it's why Usyk will always be a special fighter to me. And when idiots get on the internet and say, "Oh, who is he beat?" or whatever, It's a reflection really of their intelligence of boxing more than it is, or they're trying to be a contrarian and be the smartest guy in the room, but they're somehow becoming the dumbest guy in the room because they really don't know what they're talking about. And Ben is one of these fighters, at least to me, from this fight, where he just got every single advantage. He's getting a lot of money. He's bringing a guy up in weight. This is going to
He has
be,
multiple promoters trying to court him,
yeah,
basically.
it's just, he just has every advantage, right? And then it's like you're getting the treatment where he's coming out of a fancy car. And then you look at him and it's like all he really has is a swarm attack. It's like he's swarming you with aggression. And if you don't pull back on a straight line and you punch back a little bit, doesn't really have anything else. And it's just hard. And I said that same thing on X. And I know you love when I quote my X account. You're a big X guy. I know you're a big Reddit guy too. Um, the hard part about it is whether you say he's elite or not, getting the amount of money he was paid by Zuffa Boxing makes you elite. That's elite level money. So despite not having a world championship, the fact that he's fought in 2 main event pay-per-view fights in the UK, the fact that he's getting a lot of money, that is that of an elite fighter. I think the closest comparison is Ryan Garcia to him, but Ryan always had substance. There was at least something we saw: speed, knockout powers early. I think also more of a love of boxing. Without being harsh, I don't see it with Conor Benn.
Not to mention the fact, Lukie, that, Regis had been fighting at 140 pounds his entire career and was moving up above welterweight for this fight. This was, in theory, right? Like, this is one of those fights that's created to make Conor Benn look like a killer, and he
And
didn't
he
take
didn't.
advantage of that.
He looked extremely limited. I believe it was a 98-92 scorecard. I felt it was as close as 96-94. Maybe I was going against him, but to me, it was bad. I mean, this is a fighter who's supposed to be a top-notch guy, and he's like, I mean, I was thinking to myself last night on Fight Cover, the DMG Promotions card for BoxingScene.com, the most trusted source of boxing on the internet. Be sure to read that report if you're fascinated on it. I could write down numbers on paper, and at some point, I could probably get one number right on calculus. But it doesn't mean I understand the thought process or anything. I can guess and sometimes get something right. And that's what it felt like Conor Benn was doing in there. He was in there, maybe not calculus, maybe it was algebra. He was in with an old algebra teacher. And the guy physically couldn't write as well anymore. But when he made him think, it's like he's like, oh God, the coach told me this. What do I do here? What do I do? Swarm, run at him, overwhelm him, bully him. And it was just like I've not seen an elite level fighter that really just doesn't have much. I mean,
It's not really a good look for him. It's not a great look for Zuffa that they dumped all this money and that number was made public, and that he just looked so average, and there's already, issues with UFC fighters being upset about their pay. Like, it's just, the whole thing is just not a good look.
we'll call it a mid-off. So that's the Conor Benn mid-off. Kind of the rest of the fight card that I think you should know about. Richard Riakporhe absolutely beat the brakes off of Jamie TKV. I think we can skip it. It just wasn't good. I mostly watched the Masters golf tournament during that fight. It just wasn't good. To be perfectly honest, it didn't feel like a TV level fight, but it's a British fight where a British belt was on the line. I think it means a lot to the fans over there. But for me, it just didn't meet my standards. Riakporhe actually is a really, he's like kind of one of our guys. Underrated guy, holds a win over CBS, now at heavyweight. And Jamie TKV beat Fraser Clark, which segues into Justice Hooney beats Fraser Clark in an absolute barn burner. It was the most exciting, non-exciting fight I've ever seen in my life, if that makes sense. Hooney is going to have problems at a certain level because he just doesn't hit hard enough, but he has fast hands like you talked about. He's probably going to turn into, if Kabayel, our guy, stays at the elite level, he's probably going to be the test for fighters to face Kabayel, because he presents some of the problems Caballel does without the work rate or the power. And I could see him falling into, I'm getting ready to fight Caballel. Let me fight Justice Hooney to see how I do with a guy who's smaller and fast hand.
But he doesn't have the same, temperament. He's not as much of a pace pusher the way that Caballel is. I look at him, and it's funny because he was on last night, but there's things about him that kinda remind me of Vito Mielnicki, where he has some really good fundamentals. He's got some good variety to his game, but there's a lack of explosiveness in his punching that it's not like difference making power in a fight. And I think that it's a style that, is gonna give anybody problems, but who he can actually beat is gonna be, like, the question.
But and like, okay, Joe Gallagher's training Fraser Clark for this fight. Joe, I think, is a very good trainer. Absolutely legend in the corner, just like the most brutally honest corner that you've ever heard for this fight. But then you have to wonder, Hooney and Clark both have been knocked out. They've been Wardleyed by Fabio Wardley, so to speak. And then Jamie TKV does a number on Fraser Clark, and then Hooney goes life or death with him and never rocks him. I mean, it's one of these weird fights where it's a great fight, but it still leaves you questions because it's like, where is Hooney's ceiling at this division if
Well,
like
that was
kind of.
the issue for Hooney in the Wardley fight, right? Like, 'cause he's dominating whatever 8 or 10 out of 11 rounds, and no one punch ever really did a number on Wardley, even though he was dominating, which left room for Wardley to get that knockout.
And then I wanted to bring up one other fight on the undercard, deep cut that I know you love. Powell August beat Simon Zachenhauer. Love this fight. You're probably like, what is it? Guy took the fight on 2 weeks' notice, wins a points decision 58-56, comes in, battle of undefeateds. Love it. Love it, love it, love it.
We love those.
We love those. What's the next compelling card that you want to speak on?
Well, I think for me, it's worth bringing up, Tenshin Nasukawa's win over Juan Francisco Estrada. At least it looked a little like a passing of the torch moment. Estrada fighting at a high level at 118 pounds for the first time, and Nasukawa coming off of his first loss, kind of looking to see, and he had looked so spectacular early in his career, but we've been kind of looking to see now, like, what is he for real? Um, and I just thought that it was a very intelligent performance from him. It wasn't just that he went in and beat up an older fighter and an older champion. He outthought an all-time great, which regardless of where Estrada is, I think is significant. But of course, there was the size difference. Whether he was landing clean or not, I just felt like the whole fight was like Estrada flying backwards. You know, he was landing on the shoulder and Estrada would go flying across the ring. He lands his jab. I think a mix of that is the size, where he's got that thud that's pushing Estrada off balance. But I also see an older fighter who's having a hard time keeping his legs under him and keeping his balance. But Estrada showed a lot of balls. He won a couple of rounds. He made adjustments, but Nasukawa stayed patient, and I think looked like a top level guy.
I call it a shut the door fight. He shut the door on Estrada. I feel like when I was thinking about it, it was like a real 50-50. How good is Tenshin? Within 2 minutes of watching this fight, you kind of just knew that he was going to put it on him. It was speed, it was size, it was talent. But the big thing was he didn't let a future Hall of Famer sneak his way into title contention in a weight class he probably shouldn't be competing at. I think Estrada in his mind looked at this division and said, hey, this is a weaker division. Maybe I can go for another belt in another weight class. And Tenshin just kind of said, your time has passed you by, which I think that's what the great up and comers do.
Absolutely. And I think that was just his composure coming off a loss against, like I said, against an all-time great. You know, you can I think we could all kind of see that's not Estrada's natural weight. There's a bunch of things working against him there, but even when Estrada would come out and, you know, land something big or throw a nice combination or make an adjustment, you know, it never rattled Nasukawa, and he was able to stay within himself and win the fight, and I thought it was impressive.
It's a great performance. It was really a good one. Did you catch any of the Pro Box shows?
So I watched Vito Melnecki beat, I believe his last name was Huerta. And I thought, listen, bro, I really like Vito. I think that part of what happens when you turn pro that early is everybody develops a little different. You know what I mean? Sometimes you're Abdullah Mason and sometimes you're Joey Spencer, and it can go a couple of different ways, right? But I think that Vito has a style that will last. I think it has a style that travels well and can carry over for a long time because he doesn't take a lot of unnecessary punishment. He's not the fastest, he's not the biggest puncher, he's not the strongest, but he has really good fundamentals and fights intelligently in a way where he's not taking beatings fight after fight. And I think he just gets like a little better every time. It's not these big shifts where we're seeing like a pay-per-view superstar out of nowhere. But I feel like he's constantly putting together building blocks to make himself into a complete fighter. And it was a tricky enough opponent that you could see you could really see his IQ working.
Got two comps for him. They're NBA comps. You know I love my NBA comps. So is Vito closer to Mike Conley Jr. or PJ Tucker? Because I feel like he's going to have a lot of longevity like those two. But which would you say is a better comparison?
I think the Conley comparison makes sense, right? Because Conley was a point guard that was just really good at everything and not really great at anything. But if he was the kind of guy you could put in the game and he could have an impact somewhere. And it
And
just that's what I see with Vito is it's like he may not be blowing, knocking your socks off right now, but that's a stop. The way he's able to keep his composure for a 23-year-old guy, like I just think as he moves up, that's really going to serve him like it would for Shakur or Sky Nicholson. I'm not saying he's that type of skill level, but he's like the JV version of that, where I
oh,
think
he's
that,
talented. You see the
yeah,
amateur background with Vito, and for me, it feels like he hasn't quite put it all together. The thing that impresses me about Vito is whether he has a good performance or a bad performance, he always seems to take the professional side of the sport very serious. He comes in shape. He comes in looking
I like him at
refined.
middleweight too.
Yeah, I just think that like with him, guys develop differently, and it feels like he's maximizing his potential and he's trying to get better each and every fight. And I think there is something to be said that like when you see someone who's all like a lot of times I feel like the young fighters who don't reach their ceiling, there's like a plateau of learning with like fitness that go hand in hand where you don't consistently see them like in the same shape fight after fight, and maybe they're not pushing themselves fight after fight, or you feel like maybe they could get a little more out of one aspect of their game. And with Vito, I feel like he's getting everything. It's just hard when you turn pro at 17. Like it's not normal. You know, you're fighting grown men. This is not, so it's like you have to be an exceptional talent to take that Abdullah Mason road. And really honestly, he's had a pretty good pro career, all things considered.
I think he's had a really good pro career. I've also seen him in person at Prudential Center last year. He was on the same card as Jahai and Truck Simpson. And seeing him in person, there's something more, and you know this when you've seen certain fighters in person that you don't know, you're not always seeing everything on through the screen. And I felt like with that fight, seeing him in person for the first time and seeing it, how complete his game was impressive.
I'll say this. This is a funny statement, but I find it to be true. I think he's the type of fighter that an undefeated prospect doesn't want to run into because he's developing well, and I think he could handle being the quote unquote B side. And
He's
but
beating undefeated guys consistently as well.
but I'm saying I think he'd if there was like up and comer that everyone's saying is really really good, and he's rather untested, and they had a title eliminator. I think he's starting to be someone where like there'd be fans that would be like, "Oh yeah, you could beat this guy." And I think there's a level of mental toughness along with ability and experience where he's starting to become an underrated fighter who is overlooked, who could give a lot of guys problems in the right situation.
Yeah, I think that the next step for him and frankly for all of his peers, right, the rest of these up and coming middleweights is to start matching up together, whether it's him and
Make
Jahai
fights.
Tucker. Yeah,
Make
make
fights.
fights. You got they all kind of have to test that water now. I feel like they all have to some extent. Like when I think about those guys, I'm talking about him, Jahai Tucker, Troy Isley. There's a batch of younger middleweights that Jesus Ramos, they're all very promising. And I think now they're going to have to start building a legacy against each other.
Yeah, it's we got to see him. One fight stood out to me last night on that card. Yan Marcos, Dwight Flemings Jr. Did you have any thoughts on this?
My thoughts are that I was surprised. I saw Flemings on the undercard, I believe on the undercard of Danny Garcia's last fight, and I was very impressed. But listen, bro, he was also doing the thing that we're talking about other prospects doing, which he was taking on another tough, unbeaten guy that had no familiarity with losing, and that can happen sometimes. But obviously, it was surprising. I think that Flemings was one of the guys on that Danny Garcia card that people were the most excited about. So that fight definitely caught me off guard. We have Lukie kind of just walking off camera on this one, so that was pretty cool. But yeah, I think for Flemings, like these types of fights are not the end of the world. You know, I think normalizing losing is important. He's a guy who's shown a lot of promise and a lot of skill. And I look forward to seeing him again. But for Jan, I mean, that was a real coming out performance. And I certainly didn't expect it. Let's see.
Okay, so I'm back. I went to get coffee. I got the coffee stash. I was expecting that to be shorter than it was. Look, Flemings is a guy who we always see the talent, but we're not sure where it stands at the world class level, right? Because it's obvious he's not a domestic US fighter, that he's a level above, he's capable of going to a different level, but he's a young guy, and you just don't know how it shakes out when you take your first real fight. It's not a condemning of anything. And Jan Marcos is a fighter who I had great respect for because he basically went into the guy's hometown. He went to New Jersey to fight him on the B side, even though you could say he was the A side. He went to someone's hometown, gets dropped, gets off the canvas. I thought the one thing that stood out to me was how important the fight was for both fighters. Neither guys took risks to kind of cement the fight. There was a level of tension, and you felt that tension at the end of the fight where neither side won it. And that's why I wanted to bring it up was, yeah, Fleming's lost, but it's like a lot of guys in this division lose this type of fight. And it's not that big of a deal. It's like he took a real fight at home against a guy who has attributes of possibly being a world champion, who said, just throw me in with a tough guy. I'm from somewhere else. I can't get hometown fights. Throw me in tough. It just was notable from the mindset. The only thing is, like, both guys need more experience, and you can't buy experience, right? And when you get experience, I feel like you learn to get your punch volume up strategically, and you could just see the inexperience from both fighters. So I felt like the tension and the serious of the moment went into their brains and not into the fight at times.
Well said. And I think, again, to add on to what you said about the losing not being the end of the world, right? We've seen that with a couple of Robert Merriweather loss recently, right? Like prospects are going to lose when you fucking, when they go pro this young, when they're fighting tough guys, that is inevitable. It's just a part of development, and it's a part of development that I feel like a whole generation of fighters tried to skip over to keep that as a piece of their marketability. And it's nice to see that going away.
Well, I think it's ballsy, right? Because guys we used to get 20-0 fighters that were like 5-0 fighters. They were like 6-round 5-0 fighters. And now we're getting guys with real records. And I think we're getting, honestly, a smarter fan base. As our show gets bigger, I think the people that watch boxing as niche as it is understand they don't want just a polished record. They want guys that have taken fights, that have been tested. They want compelling matchups. When you read our chat, when you look at the names that people want to see, they want good fights. And I think that also, here's a crazy one.
There's also no world where every fighter is undefeated and boxing is interesting.
But I was going to throw out another one, and we don't even have a betting sponsor. I think sports betting is making boxing have to make better matchups, because if every fight is like a mismatch because of the betting, how do you sell that to your TV network if they're like, oh, this is a massive underdog fight, you know? So I think also the sports betting has made boxing have to make better fights.
I never really thought of that. I guess that's kind of, I'd have to think more about that, but that's an interesting point.
That's what we do on this show. One other fight, two fights I want to talk about. Well, let's talk about the Prudential Center card that you didn't watch. We'll just go through three. Manuel Chance fought my guy Angel Munoz. Absolutely delightful gem that I absolutely hope one day you go back and watch. Emmanuel Chance is one of these guys who I bet had 1 million amateur titles. He just looks like he'd kill you in the amateurs, and Shakur's his buddy. And he has to figure out a pro style because he shot his wad in 2 rounds. So he came out fast as hell, tense. It's his hometown. And I think part of it is fighting in New Jersey and being excited, and you're young, and I'm going to show out. And he drops Munoz in the 2nd round. But by the 4th round, his speed and his legs had left him. And this fight got very competitive just because of the pacing and the cadence of the fight. It was, and then Munoz, I think, is like has a 500 record now. One of the best 500 records in the boxing. Like, not a 500 record. He's like a 6-0 prospect or a 6-1, like an Angel Rubularo for fans of this show, where the record doesn't match the skill set. He just takes fights. He doesn't care. And this was a 1 of 2 ways fight for Emmanuel Chance. It's I need to work on how I pace myself in the ring, or he's going to run into 8-round fights against guys that are a little physically tougher, a little bit more durable, and those fights are going to get weird because it really feels like his style was jump out to an early lead, and then and as the rounds go, you can't just build up a 2-round lead and be good.
That is the big difference when you come from a world of fighting 3-round fights all the time. We see that where you go balls to the wall for 2 rounds and then you have it in the bag, and that just doesn't work in the pros.
So that's one I wanted to bring up. Francisco, I think his name's Daniel Veron. I forget the middle one.
He's tremendous, bro.
I put out on X, and you're a big X guy. You're a big X guy. Put out that like he could win a title, and people brought up like how stacked the division is. They're like Vander's there, and maybe against Kelly.
Isn't he at middleweight?
I think he's 54. I'd have to look, but he beats Raul Garcia, and it's like, I mean, maybe it's just hyperbole to me, but it feels like he's run the gauntlet of all the really tough guys that could give you issues. Like, he got a draw with Jahai. He beat Vladimir Hernandez. Now he beats Raul Garcia. I'm sure there's a guy I'm forgetting. His losses to Brandon Adams, a really good veteran. I mean, he is a real under-the-radar top 10 contender that I feel like is just... and I think there's part of it is a bias that when guys do things the right way, quote unquote, just take fights, and when they don't talk trash, and even more so when they don't speak English, there is a subsection of the American fan that goes, oh, he fights on ProBox. His fights are mostly decision. He doesn't speak English, where he doesn't get the same attention. But I think he's becoming like a real... He reminds me of the Carlos Molina, Richard Abril. Who was the other guy?
I think he might be better than that, Lukie. I gotta be honest. I think he might be one level up from that. And like the Villa fight for me was kind of the one, because Villa is such a big puncher, and he's sort of like a brutal Angulo Margarito type of guy. He wears on you over time. He's banging you to the
Beat you up
body,
guy.
arms.
Beat
Yeah,
you up guy.
exactly. He's a beat you up guy. And I mean, Varane completely dominated that fight tactically, and in moments where it got physical, he was just fine. So I don't know, man. I think he might, but the April comparison I think is fair. But I just think that I think this guy is a capital C contender. I really do.
Well, I mean, I think it's obvious to that, and it's just I wanted to bring him up because that's what our program does. Is he's having very professional performances, and I feel like boxing is a very unprofessional sport at times, where the more unserious your performance is, the more headlines you're going to get. And when you have a professional performance, it's like let's put you on at the last 10 seconds of the show, you know.
Listen, Curtis Harper still fights on TV, bro. You know.
And then your guy Johan Gonzalez dropped Herbert Conceição, 2020 Olympic gold medalist from Brazil. Conceição wins, but he looks the part of a guy who's a young pro, moving kind of quick in the ranks. Gonzalez, as we both know, can punch really hard. He filled in last minute for Janibek after his nonsense to fight Lara. He lost that fight. But Gonzalez has had good, credible wins. He's always kind of lost to that next level guy. To me, it just looked a little too soon, too early, too soon. Conceição ran into some punches that I guess probably against the lower level opposition he had been facing the tier before this. You just simply can't get hit with those shots. And I think some people would condemn it and go, oh man, but I just think he was trying to move a little quick because he's an Olympic gold medalist. And he learned that, like, you know, there's a certain level of veteran physical guy that you can't disrespect what they're doing because the craft might not be there, but the power certainly is.
And they're not going to get intimidated or overwhelmed by what you're doing. I think that's the big thing too, was Gonzalez has seen enough things in the ring. And you're right, he is kind of a limited guy that won't win at a certain level, but he's seen enough things that there was nothing Conceição was doing that was going to wow him or intimidate him.
Let's go DMG Promotions. They put on a card. I feel like I'm probably one of the few people in the world that bought the pay-per-view because the main event didn't happen. The main event between Brandon Adams and Art Garco was off. Adams sadly was hospitalized the day of the weigh-in. The fight hopefully gets made.
You know why?
I don't know any specifics. I'm going to try to follow up this week and figure out more and get more details on that story because that feels like a good follow-up story to get the information on what exactly happened. Chantel Navarro was the headliner, and I mean, talk about a fascinating family. The Navarro family, it's like all the brothers fought as pros. Now it's the cousins. So it's Steven, Jonathan, David, and Chantel. And she's the first women's boxer from the Navarro family. And Perlo Lomeli is a 7-7 fighter, but is crazy as hell, really tricky, and has given everybody a lot of trouble. And she's a fighter who, if promoted and had ASI treatment, would probably be like 12-2. And Navarro, I thought, did a good job learning on the job in her first 8-round fight. Her first main event fight is in Las Vegas, filling in for someone. I thought it was a notable fill-in. Ebenezer Griffith also stopped Wayne Bordeaux with a body shot, which really stood out to me because Wayne Bordeaux is a 2019 Olympic trials contestant. I believe he was stopped by Marquez Valle at the Olympic trials, but still, he's a guy who has good rhythm. He catches you with a jab and looks to time you with a right hand. And I think that he fought a fighter on a Thompson boxing card where it could have gone either way. And Griffith didn't have a lot of answers in this fight, to be honest with you. I did an interview with him, and he came back to the sport around COVID, training with his brothers. And after he came back to the sport, he won some amateur tournaments, decides to go pro. Really nice guy. But like there's a level of he doesn't have that deep experience. When you see him in the ring, he looks like a young pro who gives his all physically, but he's learning some of like the experience in the ring. He doesn't quite have it. I think his greatest attribute is that he's a good guy. Like he's a genuinely nice guy and he's willing to be coached and learn. but I was impressed because this fight felt like it was like a flip a coin fight at the point, and he landed a body shot and stopped a guy who had more experience than him, quite honestly. So I thought that was impressive. I thought the card was rather fun. DMG Promotions, for those, and I don't even get paid to say this, but it's like for the West Coast, if you want to see like that mid-tier show that's just above a club show, they're really providing a lot of opportunities for fighters that are looking for opportunities. And I thought that this kind of filled that. Julian Montavo got a 6-round unanimous decision on the undercard. Just a fun little quality night. Now we'll go into the fight you're going to attend. So we'll go into that.
Bro, can we just real quick talk about Osleys Iglesias? I mean, to me, that was like the performance
that's
of the
the guy.
weekend.
Let's talk about it. Let's talk about, how did I forget? Let's do that.
To me, bro, I just think that when you're in a position like him where you're such a dangerous guy and you're beating high level opposition that maybe doesn't have the biggest name, but if you're in the know, you kind of know how dangerous he is. And I don't see anybody like anybody with a name is sort of forgetting that he exists, right? And he's doing it real low key. He's beating guys like Ekbeko, and he's beating guys. Who's the Russian guy? The
Evgeny
Shevchenko.
Shevchenko with
Yeah.
Eddie Croft. Yeah.
Yeah, Shevchenko. Like he's taken like the Sergio Martinez route, right? Where he's gonna beat Zinzurek, and then he's gonna beat Macklin, and then he's gonna beat Darren Barker. Like he's just beating the best guy that he can get in the ring with him. And he's so accurate, he's so powerful. Silyagin was a quality guy, had a rough first 2 rounds, and then showed some real skill and balls to kind of hold his position in the center of the ring and try to compete. And he just couldn't. He was just several levels of skill below Iglesias, and had to be stopped in the corner because of that eye. I thought he showed a lot of heart, but I think that Iglesias, I mean, he's looking to me a little bit like how I felt about Artur Beterbiev in like 2017. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, I'm gonna go on some. I mean, he's my guy. I think that there's a chance that he's a pound for pound top notch fighter. Like he's looking that part. He's looking kind of like a 2026 Gennady Golovkin to me, to be honest. Like there's an inevitable outcome of a.
But it's weird because he's not even like that much of a front foot guy. He has more like he has different gears he can go to, where I almost see more of like a Terrence Crawford. Like there's a completeness to him that, you know what I mean? I know that's a crazy comparison to make, but you get what I'm saying.
I get what you're saying. Why I compare him to Golovkin is, with Golovkin, there was like a fear you felt after he landed a punch that the guy is really hurt. And it was like he was being hunted almost in the ring. And Iglesias does it a different way, but I mean, would I be wrong in saying he's one of the hardest punchers in the sport? Like, there's a different level when he's hitting. It's almost like an Inoue, where it's like he's a destructive puncher. I mean, I think he's the best super middleweight in the world currently. And it's
he's
like,
also doing it in a way where you're not going to get like brownie points in the social media world. Like no one's going to give him a pat on the back for beating Vladimir Shishkin, but that's a big win. Shishkin was a guy that's been in the top 10 for years, has been relatively avoided, lost a pretty bad decision in my view to William Skull. And it was just like, there's different ways to get it. There's different ways to build a legacy. And that's why I'd use the Sergio Martinez comparison, because at times Martinez was so dominant, but he had a hard time getting other big names to fight him because he was more trouble than he was worth. And so all he did was get the best possible guy he could in the ring with him, and he beat him. And that's what Osleys is doing.
To me, he's the most avoided fighter in boxing. He's the most avoided fighter, because you look at that.
Tough to make an argument against that.
I mean, are we going to be facts only? Let's be facts only. He won a world title, and no disrespect to Pavel for fighting him, because much credit to him for doing it.
I think he's very skilled as well, by the way.
But the people ranked ahead of him were Canelo Alvarez. I believe at one time Jaime Munguia was ranked above him, Troy Williamson, and then it was him. So a couple of people went a different direction. It's basically the guys that are willing to fight him at this point are guys who are looking to take risks, who feel like they have no opportunities. He's not getting the guys like a Munguia. He's not getting the big name fighters
He's not getting
because
him Billy. He's not getting
no,
Pacheco. He's not getting Lester. Because frankly, he's just going to be a favorite against all those guys. I guess I'm semi-interested in the Billy fight because we haven't really seen him against like an intense pressure guy like that. But I also see a world where he's just piecing him Billy up, man. Like, I think he's scary.
he's one of the most fascinating fighters to me because it's like the way he starts a fight is so calm, but he does immense damage. Like I can't think of a fighter who starts out boxing you and either gets a first round knockout or causes serious damage that sets, because that's kind of his secret, is he does damage to you in the first round and now you're compromised. And then he's like, okay, in this fight, what was crazy was it felt like if he wanted to, he could have picked it up and taken damage and stopped him quicker. But he said, nah, I don't want to take any shots. So I'm
But
just
he's
going to
got
go.
that's where he's got that Lara thing, bro. Like he's not getting hit, but he's fucking you up. You know what I mean? He really does kind of have that.
It's kind of like a Lara 2.0 where there's more punches being thrown, but he's not going to fight on your terms. Like he's like, I'm not going to give you like, and I thought Pavel showed a lot of grit and determination to stay in there and push him back, because like that must be a scary feeling, because he lets you come forward because he's looking to land that right hook. And if you get
He's
out,
waving him in. He's going like
yeah,
this.
he's like moving back. He's like, come on, man, come on. And it's like just to go rounds with him. I mean, he's so good. I think it speaks to the caliber of the fighters if you go rounds with him. Top 10 fighters. Like, I don't know, man. I think this guy could be a pound for pound number one.
Very possible, bro.
It,
I think he's got an exciting career ahead of him, and he may not get all the big fights the way Sergio Martinez didn't. But already, when you look down his resume, it's sizable.
real guys. He consistently is fighting real guys. And it's like I wrote in the fight recap of this, needs a belt. This is a guy
Has
who
a belt.
needs a belt. No, but
Has
this is a guy that needed the belt. Like he needed to
right.
get that IBF belt, because now it's like, okay, guys, you want to unify? You want to be everyone talks about, I want to be undisputed. Okay, I got a belt. And I mean, I don't see this guy turning anything down. And what's also interesting is Billy and Iglesias are both signed to Eye of the Tiger. So it'll be interesting because there's a world where maybe Eye of the Tiger has all the super middleweight champions at one point.
And maybe they could promote that kind of like in-house, you know?
I mean, you know how much I love Eye of the Tiger. I think they're fantastic. I think Mark Ramsey is a genius. And I think that in terms of putting on quality shows, they do about as good a job as Top Rank of building these guys up to maximizing their potential. They find fighters, they invest in them, they challenge them. Some of the fighters lose. And pretty much every fighter you watch that gets to a certain level on Eye of the Tiger gets a title fight because they build them the right way. You don't just see guys that are like, okay, they're building them, and then they lost to the guy that loses to the guy that fights for the belt.
It's a great point. It's I think one of the better like B-level promotions of the
I
moment.
think they're A. I think they have the best
Sure.
roster in boxing. I think they have the best roster in terms of talent.
I'd have to do that comparison, but they've put themselves in a position, especially now that these fights are going to be on the zone, where like you have to pay attention.
Oh yeah. Let's go speed round. You're gonna be at Alycia Baumgardner's fight. You're gonna be at Shadeja Green's fight. Give us the storylines you're looking at. I'm gonna use the bathroom, and then I'm gonna jump in with my half-baked opinions. But I've got some storylines for this, but I want to hear you because you're gonna be boots on the ground, giving us insight.
Well, I guess I'll start with the local champion, of course, my friend Shadeja Green from Paterson, New Jersey. She's going to be taking on Lonnie Daniels. It's the first time she's defending her unified title. She's a multi-belt titleist now after a win over Savannah Marshall last summer. And and shameless promotion real quick, there will be an episode of The Fight Life with Shadeja Green coming out in the next couple of days on ITR Boxing, so you can get a look inside of her camp leading up to this fight. I think you guys will really enjoy that. But what I'm looking forward to seeing in this fight is the way they're approaching camp is they want to get back to knockouts and domination. And that is one thing we haven't seen since the Franchon fight. And I think that everything about their preparation right now is to have a wow performance. Will that actually happen? For Alicia's opponent, Bo Mi Re Shin, I think she's good. She had a great performance against Caroline Dubois. It seems like the bells are being tolled for a matchup between Caroline Dubois and Alycia, even though I don't get the sense that Alycia is interested in that. They don't even really fight at the same weight class. But there's no way this fight won't be used as a comparison or for a measuring stick to Caroline Dubois.
So you stole my thoughts, which is probably why you're my co-host, so I can take a break. But I mean, I look at these two fights and see similar fights. It's Alycia Baumgardner, up and down. Her last performance, she looked really good. And I think a big credit to that is Derek James. You know, Derek's a great coach. And I think that, I don't want to say Tony Harrison gets too much credit for Alycia, but Alycia had athletic gifts that are a part of her career. I think that she's a great athlete, right? She's like probably could do
natural gifts are kind of what carried the show for her.
And I think that what's interesting is she's hitting a part. I don't know her age per se, and I'm by no means saying she's old, because you look at me and her, and I think most people would want to hang out with her and not me. But she's hitting a point in her career where she has to be more judicious and more efficient with what she does. You know, you start hitting a point in your life and you can't just rely on being the better athlete than people. And I think Derek hasn't gotten the credit he deserves for kind of honing and getting the most out of her, because I felt like her against Layla Bodine was a more complete performance than I had seen from her in some time, because she didn't just kind of look for the right hand. There was more going on. It was like, how do we kind of make this into a thing? And then you look at her opponent, it's quite obvious that this is, can you do better than Caroline Dubois? She had a very close fight,
which is
with
a
her.
dangerous narrative for her, because it's not a gimme win.
And I'll be honest, I'm not sure she's a top 10 women's boxer currently. She has a lot of seesaw performances. It seems like she likes being a celebrity in boxing as much as she likes being a boxer.
You mean top 10 pound for pound?
Yes, in women's boxing. I'm not sure she's there. You know, to me, it's Ellie Scottney and Gabriela Fandora occupy 1 and 2, and then we fill out the rest right now. And I mean, this is a great way to say that you're one of the best women's boxers, because this is a professional opponent who's coming to win, who really isn't going to talk trash to you. And it's all about your motivation of holding your spot at the highest level of the division, who gave a really good fighter who is now being named as like your adversary a really hard fight. This is a professional performance where those Lomachenko's and those Usyks and the great fighters, the Crawfords, and these are looked at as like stay busy tune-up fights. But in reality, you're shutting the door on a great championship contender. That's what the great fighters do. Their tune-up fights are great record padding contenders they keep off. So for me, this kind of shows where Baumgardner's at. Is she content with her spot in boxing, or is she really looking to be the next Katie Taylor, to be the next Amanda Serrano? Is she looking to be the face of the company?
I kind of think she thinks she's there already, to be honest.
To me, she sort of is, but to me, she needs a dominant performance to fend off a contender like this.
Right. I'm not saying if she is or isn't. I'm saying she thinks she is.
I get that. And look, boxers are supposed to be a little not normal. because there's nothing normal about being a boxer, and that there's nothing wrong with even thinking you're there. But what I'm saying is, from us pundits, objective people, this is a prove it fight. You think you're there. Well, we don't believe just words. So this is a statement fight for her. So that's the story I see in the main event. For Shadeja, it's very similar. She's been talked about with Clarissa Shields. Clarissa Shields doesn't have that many opponents at or around her weight. This is Clarissa had a certain type of performance against Lonnie Daniels. I think, quite frankly, this is do better and possibly beat up and make this opponent, Lonnie Daniels, not look talented. Make it look like there's a class distinction to create excitement for a potential Clarissa Shields fight. Those are the stories I see going in.
And I think that's certainly been the goal in camp for Shadeja and for the coaches. And I think that, you know, I know that Shadeja wants the Clarissa fight, but I know she's also committed to staying active and staying busy and not waiting on Clarissa. And now you see her going out and Shields, I mean, you know, she's in the ring after the fight with Lauren Price. She's talking about a fight with Michaela Mayer down at 160. She's talking about fighting all of these smaller fighters, and I think it would just be a real shame if she did that without getting to Shadeja.
Yeah, we'll see. Also on the card, our guy Jamal Harvey. What up, though? And Tam Theobald are going to be on there. Tam's pretty good. And then let's just get our final news and notes in. So we hit these and we get Dakota out by his hard out time, which is in 10 minutes. And we are going to say, if you love this program, you probably should watch the Cristobal Lorenta versus Nathaniel Collins WBC featherweight eliminator in Scotland. The first fight was an absolute fun European fight. If you only watch American boxing, it's probably not for you, but if you enjoy just good fights, that is definitely worth watching. Do you have any comments on that, Dakota?
Unfortunately, I don't. That might even be too deep a cut for your boy.
Okay, that's good. That's good. That's good. Then we go to the sad news of the week, which I'm not fully sure if you're aware of this news, but Callum Smith is not going to be fighting David Morrell this week. The fight has been called off. Injury happened in camp, so that fight's going to be postponed. Now Ben Whitaker is fighting someone I have no clue who he is. His name actually looks like a misspelling to me, so I'm not sure if it's a typo or not, but we're getting Ben Whitaker, Peter McGrill, Joe McGrill, Leo Ontong, a great heavyweight, and Molly McCann, all in fights that I have no clue who the opponents are. So it's more of a developmental card from that type of card. It wasn't the strongest card to begin with. So kind of weakens the weekend boxing, so to speak, because Ben Whitaker is a fascinating fighter. I quite like him. I think there's a fondness from the 2021 Olympics where I watched him and I saw a lot of talent. I saw him beat Iman Kitov, who was my favorite Olympian in that Olympics. I was just such a big fan. But there is a feeling that I get with fans, and I sort of start to get where it's like, oh, Ben Whitaker's fighting, probably not fighting a guy that I've ever heard of after the Liam Cameron fight, where it's like, oh,
it's like really a Richard Torres type of development where it's like, I like the fighter. I just don't understand what we're doing with the opponent sometimes.
I think with Whitaker, it's even deeper than that. There's like a multifaceted thing. I think British fans don't love cocky fighters. So there's a level of like America and social media. I think that they like to glorify like a guy who's like a blue collar guy, even if he's cocky. Like you look at Joshua and Chisora, they're kind of like man's man.
They may not glorify him, but they sure do prop him up. I mean, you look at Ben and Eubank, if they have the right reason, they'll glorify a douche the same way we do.
For sure. I just think that maybe I'm saying it wrong with words, but I feel like the British really love like a blue collar Ricky Hatton type guy. Nigel Benn, blue collar. Eubank might have been so the opposite of it that people love to hate him because he's so. Yeah, and I think that Ben Whitaker was on the Eubank trajectory of just like, I'm a big personality, I'm going to do this. And then he runs into Liam Cameron, who's kind of the trope of the British boxer that people love. Hard luck tough guy. And then I think there was a sentiment that some felt he quit in that fight, where it was a weird thing. And he's never really gotten over that stigma. He stops him in the rematch, but it's like, I just feel as though people wanted to not like him, and now they've kind of condemned him until he takes a fight and proves him otherwise. And since signing with Matchroom, it's kind of been, get your feet wet matchmaking, so to speak, right now. And this matchup, it's like, okay, am I going to stay home to watch it? No, I'm not going to stay home to watch it. Will I probably watch the fight via social media? Yeah, it'll probably be shared in a clip, the result. I can probably catch a few things. Um, he's a fascinating figure that I don't even know if he's a contender or a prospect, but he's a fascinating figure who even knows where he's going to be in a year or two. It's just a weird career because he's one of the best Olympians from that class, but he's kind of stagnated in his development.
Yeah, I definitely have enjoyed his performances when I've seen him, but that's always what happens when you talk a big game, bro. If you don't like 100% back it up, there's always going to be people that have questions about you.
Dakota special also this week, Luis Neri versus John Riel Casimiro. Sign me up for that in
That's a good
2021.
old guy fight right there.
Or is this 2021? Is this on? You know what I mean? Is this 2021? Is this the StubHub Center? That's a good one. And then we got Julius Ballo fighting in San Diego. That's also happening. That's basically your fights of the week. I guess we'll kind of conclude this show with kind of a soft April. We started hot, every month was kind of big. I guess Fury versus Makhmudov was our big fight of the month, but it kind of feels like, January was way too much fun. February had some fights. March was solid. Feels like what January usually feels like in boxing.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that there's some new things happening this month. There's been with the 2 MVPW cards. There's some good developmental cards happening, but you're right. There isn't really any big marquee fights carrying this month. And even though Fury and Makhmudov is on Netflix, that fight doesn't count to me.
But final thing, you got 4 minutes. Any thoughts on Caroline Dubois beating Terry Harper?
I thought it was a great performance. I can't remember if we talked about this fight or not. No, we didn't. I thought it was a solid first couple of rounds from Terry, and then Caroline was just faster and more physical, and she places her shots well. But I do at times there's like a lack of output from her that I find a little like that could be a problem against certain kinds of fighters or at a certain level. But outside of that, she's really tremendous. She hits really hard. She's got that Lucas body thing where it's like the power is there. So the threat of the power is there. She maybe doesn't always punch as much as she should. But there's a lot to like there. And that was a fantastic win against, I would say one of the more slept on fighters that's helped to grow women's boxing in Harper.
My favorite fight of the night, Irma Garcia, 44-year-old, beats up Emma Dolan. Like, that is probably one of the worst beatdowns I've seen in some time.
That was a beatdown. And Ellie Scottney, I can't remember who her opponent was, but
Maylee Flores Romero.
Man, that woman put on such an inspired performance, and I still kind of felt like Scottney probably won 8 or 9 rounds, but it was a second place type of performance from Mayeli Flores because she was tremendous. She fought with a lot of grit against somebody that we consider a top pound for pound fighter.
It's a great fight, and Ella Scottney, like one of the best fighters in the world, outside of her friends and family and people that watch boxing, nobody cares. Like, you're not seeing any casual people being like, man, Ella Scottney, she's the truth.
She's not clippable, bro. She's not clippable.
It's like, oh man, she just behaves like a pro athlete and just wins hard fights. What's there? But I do like that Jake Paul and MVP are getting behind her. That really feels good that like they're doing things because she really could benefit from that world pushing her because she's so talented.
Yep, agreed.
What are your final thoughts, Dakota?
My final thoughts are tune into my coverage this week of the card at the Garden. In the next couple of days, check out the 4th episode of The Fight Life with Shadej Green. And thank you for watching me and Lukie every week.
Also, when are you going to be on site so people can be checking ITR Boxing for?
I mean, I'm going to be full fight week, so Tuesday through Saturday or Tuesday through Friday.
So it's going to be coming up real soon. So you get one day off as a fight fan, and then Tuesday on, you're getting clips. Sounds good. Dakota, have a good day, and thank you to everybody for listening.